Yeah, I'm good to go. Hello everyone and welcome to the special NDTV World Economic Forum debate that takes part as part of these sessions that we have. And today we're going to be turning a look at what perhaps is a paradox in India. There's a thriving press, but are there moves now taking place towards the censorship of the internet? Does the internet need to be controlled in some way? Does the press need to be controlled in some way? We turn our attention to a lot of those issues, and we have an absolutely fantastic panel to take us through some of these crucial questions. First of all, a great pleasure and a privilege to welcome Mr. Kapil, who's the Minister for Telecommunications and also Information Technology in the Government of India. It's great, sir, to have you with us. Kris Gopalakrishnan is Executive Co-Chairman, also one of the founders of Infosys. I know he has reasonably strong views on some of what is happening. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Mr. Vineet Nair, Executive Vice Chairman of HCL Technologies. Thank you for being with us. Vikas, Bajaj is a correspondent at the NYT. Broke many of the stories to do with potential steps towards controlling the internet in India. It's great to have you with us. Chhavi, Rajawat, it's wonderful to have you with us. I've heard you described as one of the youngest panchayat leaders in India. You're the Sarpanch of Soda. It's great to have you with us. Also, perhaps to talk a bit about the digital divide that might actually be taking place. Thank you all so much for being with us, and we will have other guests who will come in as we go along. Mr. Sibal, why don't I start with you? Is India trying to control the internet? And if so, is this something that is going to be very difficult to do, given the nature of the internet?
First of all, I don't think you can control the internet. The internet is a medium which cannot be controlled because it's going to be free flow of information. And quite frankly, internet is exceptionally significant for India. And India is exceptionally significant for the internet. I mean, you look at the number of people in this country who need to be empowered. And I think perhaps internet is the only source of empowerment, the real source of empowerment. So how can we stop and emasculate that medium? Internet is evolving, it's growing. We don't know what the challenges are. We don't even understand the nature of the opportunities. They're tremendous. But I think as we move along, we'll start figuring out what we need to do to empower everybody and at the same time make sure that the challenges ahead are met together. I just came back from Baku on an international conference on internet governance. And I said, the term governance in the context of the internet is an oxymoron. Because on the internet, there are no governed and there are no people who govern. It's a free flow of information. So when you talk about governance of the internet, it makes no sense to me. What we need to do is to have a collaborative, consultative process through which all stakeholders are on the table and we decide how we move together.
So, but when you've had meetings with people from Microsoft, Google, Yahoo and others, you've told them you need to physically monitor the content. You've told them that, defamatory material is not acceptable. When we have laws like 66A or 76 or some of the others, all of these are seen as steps to try and get the intermediaries.
First of all, all these laws were on the statute book in 2008. Okay, they all happened in 2008. None of these laws came into force since 2010. But be that as it may, I don't think people have a correct understanding of the laws. Under a defamatory allegation, which is clearly defamatory, you can actually be put in prison. Under 66A, it's a bailable offense. You can't be arrested. So people don't. I mean, the media doesn't talk of any of these issues. And look at if I start reading 66A to you, you'll realize that this is all misconception. 66A says that if you know something to be false, if you yourself know something to be false, you shouldn't be putting it on the net. What's wrong with that? I mean, 66A further says that if you want to not disclose your identity, you either disclose your identity, your real identity, and put your material on the net, or if you don't want to disclose it and then you want to put abusive material, that's not fair. But even then you cannot be arrested. These are all bailable offenses.
Wait, I mean,
so what, I mean, please point out any particular issue. And I want to know, since 2010, this government, what has it done to regulate the internet? Please tell me one step that we have taken.
Well,
in fact, there are more complaints on the internet by India, by the United States of America, and by Germany, many more. And we are the ones who are accused of controlling and regulating.
Okay. Vikas, why don't I get you in before I come to some of the industrialists out here? You've been writing a lot about this, and Minister Sibal says, you know, it's really tough to get people to get arrested. Ravi Srinivasan,
not tough. You cannot. It's
Ravi
a bailable
Srinivasan
offense.
was, though. He was arrested. Ravi Srinivasan was arrested.
He was not arrested. You're mistaken. Arrest means you put somebody behind bars. It's when you say, you go, the policeman will go and say, you have committed an offense, here is bail. Can't be arrested. It's a bailable offense.
Okay.
So please, but the whole media is talking about he was arrested, means people think he's been sent to jail. Nobody can be sent to jail.
With Vikas?
79A. You want me to read the section?
Well, you know, okay, if you want to know exactly what happened, he was arrested under Section 66A.
Yes.
The police wanted a 15-day remand, and then you're right, he did come out on bail. But
not come out. He cannot be taken to prison.
Okay, he didn't go into prison. Okay,
he
fine.
cannot be taken. It's a bailable offense. Okay. Because the maximum imprisonment is 3 years. Any offense where the maximum imprisonment is 3 or less is bailable under the IT Act. So the policeman, obviously this particular policeman may have been ignorant, but the policeman cannot arrest you. He has to go to you, issue a warrant, and grant you bail. There and then.
Okay. Vikas?
Well, in that case, I believe the gentleman was given bail by the judge, by the magistrate. He was detained by the police, whether you want to call it sending him to prison or not. He's certainly not sent to prison, but he was taken from his house by the authorities, and he was granted bail by the judge. I think the concern that people have with 66 and with other aspects of the IT Act is that it leaves a lot of room for interpretation from people who feel offended by speech. And those are, I think, the main concerns of people when they look at what India has done since 2008. And I agree with the minister that it's really since 2008, since the passage of the IT Act, that a lot of these issues have come up. For instance, put aside 66A for a second and look at the IT rules which were promulgated in April of 2011. Those rules say that anybody who finds something disparaging on the internet can send a notice to the intermediary, which could be a YouTube or a Google, or it could be a web hosting company, and tell them to take it down in 36 hours. And that intermediary basically has to take it down in 36 hours. There's no process for redressal. There's no process for appeal written into the rules. Now, you can go to court, and you could challenge it in court, but there's no process of even disclosure, so you don't necessarily know that somebody has taken it down under that provision.
It's completely wrong, factually wrong, what he's saying. Right. Now, I'll give you examples. 40% of all complaints made by Indians to Google have not been responded to. You say he has to take it down. They've not been responded to. Because the rules say this. If somebody makes an application and says that something gross is happening against him, which is false, the intermediary has a right within 36 hours to decide whether he wants to move forward or he doesn't want to move forward. He may say, I don't consider your application, as has been done in 60% of the cases by Google. Or he may say, there is something in what you say. Then he has 1 month to decide. That's written into the rules. He says it's nothing there. There's nothing there. I can show him, this is the problem with India. So we don't read the rules. We don't try and understand the rules. And because we want to just make a case that India is a regulated society and that there is no freedom in the internet, I'm sorry. That's just not the case. And I would like to know, in comparison to Germany, the US, and many other jurisdictions, how many complaints have been filed by India as compared to other jurisdictions. And in fact, Google can say, I don't accept what you say. The choice is that of the intermediary, in which case the individual concerned can go to court, and the individual concerned can then get redressal from the court. If the court finds, yes, this was really disparaging, the court will pronounce that judgment. And if the court says, no, you have no cause of action, that's the end of the matter. What's wrong with that?
Vikas, is it possible you're misinterpreting the law?
Well, there's the court. The court is always there as a last resort. The point...
No, but you seem to be saying that it is
He has no
necessary for the intermediary to take it down in
off,
36
not
hours. The minister says that's not the case.
Certainly the website can choose to ignore that.
Now he's saying he choose to ignore. But he just said just recently that he has to take it off. Now he's saying choose to ignore. So what is right? Choose to ignore or take it off?
They have 36 hours to respond.
You have to say that. You didn't say that at the outset. As if, you know, India is a society which is closed, which wants to regulate everything. It's not fair.
Okay, let me just get Madhu Trehan in, and who's of course content director of News Laundry. Matter of disclosure, also the person who gave me my first job and my first boss. So anything I do wrong in journalism is her fault. Madhu.
It's going to be very difficult to counter Kapil because, as you know, he's a lawyer and he always represents his clients well. And he's doing it today. Question is that what is the credibility? Let me start with one. He has the most powerful switch in his hands, the internet killer switch. He can switch off the internet completely in this country anytime he chooses. That's number one. Number two, they keep saying we don't want to control either the media or the internet, and we will do everything according to law, which is wonderful because in 2008 they passed this IT Act when the Mumbai terror attacks took place, and they took advantage of that and slipped in a lot of things. Then they added Section 66A, under which this Ravi Srinivasan was woken up at 5 a.m. in the morning to the shock of his wife and 2 little children, dragged to jail because he had tweeted something which caused annoyance and inconvenience, which is in their IT Act, amended later, all right? So he's taken in under Section 66A. One second, let me finish. Now, we are told that you don't want to control us. A minister's son has a tweeted against him, and immediately the wheels start rolling. And it just is a matter of coincidence that the man has been part of the Indians Against Corruption. Asim Trivedi, a cartoonist who was also arrested for sedition, in which Justice Kajju publicly said that the people who arrested Asim Trivedi did a criminal act, and they should be in jail because it was unconstitutional. All right? Pranesh of Center of Internet and Society has said that your Section 66A is unconstitutional. So you are waking up a man, taking him to face a possible jail, and it is 3 years if he is found guilty, which is a higher penalty than death by negligence, which is 2 years. Does that make sense? Is that a government that is not trying to control the press? Right. In other things, you have also started in motion a privacy law.
I want a chance to respond to that, and I'll just come back to
I think what you're saying
because
is...
I need to count the ways the Congress is blessing us.
No, don't bring in political party into it. I'm here not just as a minister, but as a citizen of this country. And I can assure you that as a minister, I will protect every citizen of this country if he exercises his freedom of speech. And I will make sure that he is protected. Now, let me respond to what you said. You said that the government of India can black out the internet at any given point in time. That is true of the government of any country, anywhere in the world. Okay? So there is nothing different.
No,
it
is not.
Please. No, it is. The US can cut off. Germany can cut off. France can cut off. They have cut off. Okay, that's number one. Number two, you say somebody was woken at 5 o'clock in the morning and was taken to a magistrate. Completely wrong. The act was completely wrong. The policeman obviously did not know 66A himself. You will now find a lot of situations in India where under the penal code, policemen do a lot of things that are not allowed under the penal code.
So what
Should we scrap the penal code? One second. Let me answer now.
Wrong?
Should we scrap the penal code? Because some particular policeman has acted in a way which is inconsistent with the law? The point is the law bad or is the action bad?
No, so if I just understand you correctly, sir, you are saying that the policeman, the act that the policeman did was a wrong act.
Yes.
It was not allowed under 66A.
It was not because it's a bailable offense. He could not have woken
so
him up.
action should not be taken against the policeman concerned.
Yeah, the individual concerned, if he's done something which is inconsistent with the law, he is accountable. But you can't say scrap the law because you can't have that argument. You can say, okay, there are certain aspects of the law that need to be looked at. We can have a discussion on that. We can have a round table on that. I already have a round table. I am, in fact, contemplating another round table with all stakeholders. And if we find that there is anything that is unfair and unconstitutional, we will deal with it. But you take my assurance. This government, and don't bring political parties, is not interested in controlling the internet at all, or for that matter, regulating anything. And what does 66 say? It says, any information which he knows to be false. 66 says starts with that proposition. If I know something to be false, and then I attribute it to another person, well, obviously you're liable. If I know you have not murdered anybody, and you say you've murdered X, why should I not be liable?
Of course, in this case, it was just a comment of opinion, and that often happens.
That's often. This is okay.
Somebody were massing
I'm not
quite sure how that.
There are lots of. If you go to Kapil Sibal on the Facebook, you will see 500 things there, which I'm unhappy with. But we've not taken any action. There are things which say, "Let's go and kill him." There are tweets there which let's go and kill the man. Have I taken action? I'm here. You can kill me. But point, don't confuse the issue.
Yeah, really,
don't confuse the issue. You're
Kapil.
confusing the issue by saying the act of a policeman requires the amendment of the act.
But this constantly distancing yourself from people from your party who are getting these things done and saying we have nothing to do with it. You did it with Jayanti Natarajan's bill, which couldn't have been put in without okay from the Congress party leadership. And when there was an uproar, it was withdrawn.
Is this, Vikram, a political forum, in which case I'll have to respond politically?
Let's keep politics out of it.
I'm talking about the
not
freedom
talk
of
Congress.
press.
Yes,
Okay.
let's talk of instances of freedom of press, which there may be
All
hundreds
right,
of
so
instances.
let's talk about internet. You made, according to the Google Transparency Report, you made 355 requests for removal from.
How many did the US make?
And I don't care. I'm not a citizen of America.
Okay.
258 were criticism of the government. Only 3 were related to pornography, and 1 was related to national security. Now you tell me that you're not trying to control us?
Yes, I'm telling you we are not. Who made those requests? I want to know. 4 of them came from the Department of Telecommunications, out of the 285. The rest were all private people. Why do you laugh?
Why shouldn't I laugh?
Why you should laugh? You tell me you made as if the government did it. I am telling you, there's no distancing. I don't even know about the 285 you're talking about, because they didn't come through me. If some individual out of 1.25 billion people makes a request for taking something out, you attribute it to me. I don't understand that.
Okay, let me just get the others in. Kris, where do you stand? This is obviously a difficult question. And what Kapil is saying is that one thing is a law, one is how some people may interpret the law, and the third is how some people may abuse the law, as apparently happened in the case of.
And I say laws should be reasonable, fair, and just. If they require tweaking, we must tweak them. But merely because a law is there and somebody abuses it doesn't mean the law should be scrapped.
Okay, let me get the others in who haven't yet spoken.
So first of all, I want to step back for a second and look at the real issue here. You have unprecedented access and power in the hands of the individual. This is the first time ever in the history of mankind where you can record something, put it onto, let's say, YouTube, and it gets downloaded millions of times within a second. It's unprecedented. It doesn't have to be true. With technology, you can do any morphing, anything you want, you do that. Recently, we had the incident of somebody in west coast of US record something about Prophet Muhammad, put it onto the net, significant revolts across the world. Some people died because of that. What is right? So we have to see, when it comes to 21st century, we have to step back and look at the implications of these things as times progress. As a society, we need to decide what is the rule under which, policies under which we will live. Okay? And so I believe that the discussion that is happening is very good. We have to come together and agree what we together will set up as the policy for us.
I believe that India has an opportunity to actually lead, because we are such a diverse society. We have, every possible community and, the disparity of income, everything represented here in India. So there's a possibility here. So I believe that some restriction will come, because we want to have a society that is let's say, we want discussion, we want debate. There has to be ways in which anonymously you can put out your opinion. Like Whistleblower Act is there.
Right.
Protection must be there. But when it requires identity, when it requires you to do something, I can't make a frivolous statement against you today. You will come back after me. So those things, there has to be a mechanism to have individuals protect themselves. We have to think about that. So I believe that some amount of control and restriction, and
you're saying some amount of control and restriction may have to be there.
May have to be there. I firmly believe.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
That while there's freedom of speech, while everyone should be allowed to express themselves, given the nature of society, given the nature of everything that is happening, given the possibilities for abuse, what Kris seems to be saying is that you do need to have some control. And you can argue about what that control is.
Yeah, I think the way we have to look at this prism is that freedom of speech is great, but what is the opportunity internet has to offer? Opportunity internet has for a developing country like us is that you can reach thousands and hundreds of thousands of people on the digital world, and on physical world you could not. And therefore it has huge amount of opportunity for e-governance, huge amount of opportunity for commerce, huge amount of opportunity for content distribution. So therefore, we are slowly and steadily moving away from what I call the real world to a digital world, where your identity in the digital world is going to be of higher significance than your physical world. We have rules and regulations which govern our physical world. We have laws. We have police, which oversees those laws. We have a judiciary, which oversees the law. So somebody comes and paints paint on your house. Can you take action? Yes, there are laws in which you can take actions. And they're very defined law. They may be slow, but there's a defined law. And the government has spent a lot of money in implementing those laws, to streamline those laws, and investing in police and investigation and judiciary, so that there are deterrents from people to act. Take pornography, for example. Child pornography was a very big thing in US. And the way they sorted out is not curbing the freedom of speech, but to create deterring action, where they had these cyber cops go onto the net, project themselves as children, and try and entrap all the people who were doing child pornography. So in my mind, if we really want to convert internet into an opportunity, which is a much bigger deal than just freedom of speech, we would need to be governed by certain rules and regulations and laws, and we as society will have to come to an agreement that it cannot be free for all. Because if it is free for all, then it will lose its credibility. If it loses its credibility, we'll lose the opportunity of transforming India and transforming our business forever, which we cannot lose. Yes, freedom of speech is going to get, marginalized, but freedom of speech in the real world also comes with a certain accountability. You have to declare who you are.
Okay.
And therefore, in the digital world, I believe that we will have to come with some rules and regulations, which are not overpowering, which are not being misused, but we need to come with rules and regulations so that we convert that into an opportunity to transform India into a great nation.
Okay, Chhavi, before I come to you, Madhu, Vikas, I mean, it's got a reaction to that, because this is not a government point of view, but essentially I think both Kris and Vineet are saying is that just as in the real world, you do have some controls. You can't just go and do whatever you want. The same may have to apply in the virtual world, especially as that becomes more and more powerful and dominant. Would you agree with that? The principle of what he's saying?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of speech in every country in the world that is restricted speech. You can't go into a theater in the US, a classic example, and yell fire. That's not protected by free speech because you're endangering people's lives. You can't libel somebody. Well, in US, libel protections are generally in favor of journalists more so than they are in favor of people who felt that they've been libeled, as compared to the UK, where libel laws are more in favor of the people who feel that they have been libeled. So I think each country definitely has to figure that out for itself. And, you know, the lines that have been drawn in India are different than the lines that have been drawn in the US or the UK, and that's necessarily going to be the case. And I don't think anybody's arguing that, you know, that there's some absolute standard by which we all have to live. this is a standard that each country has to figure out for itself.
Okay, Madhu? I mean, is it your case that there should be no controls at all? Because, I mean, obviously at some level, you could argue that if somebody is, for example, morphing a picture and saying a place of worship has been attacked, and then putting that out on Twitter or Facebook or whatever else, it could lead to deaths, it could lead to riots.
Well, there are 2 points. One, I do despise the anonymity of the internet. I think there has to be accountability that if you're posting something, your identity should be disclosed. And I think that by itself will control a lot of the random, violent sort of provocative images that are put out. So I think that is important. And I think the standard rules of life apply, that, you should be accountable, liable, defamatory stuff, all that should not be allowed. However, I do feel, and I bring in the real world as well as the virtual world in this, that when we say that we cannot have the example that you gave, a holy place being desecrated, and there is this fear that there will be riots. I think, for example, the film that was made, that terrible, terrible film made on Muhammad in California, there were riots all over the world, in countries with Muslim citizens, including Pakistan. And if you look at those riots carefully, the riots were instigated by politicians of those areas to create their own foundation and following, that we are strong believers of protecting our faith, and therefore I am the man for you to protect your faith. And previously also, there have been many situations in India, such as the Jaipur Literature Festival, when a bunch of, I call them hooligans, threatened to burn down Diggi Palace if Salman Rushdie came to the Jaipur Literature Festival. Now the question is that the message was sent to Salman Rushdie to not come. In that sense, I think freedom of speech is more important in India and in our constitution than cowing down to the sentiments and feelings of hooligans which pander, a political party panders to them and they pander to that, that they can actually hold anyone to ransom by saying, we will riot or we will burn the place down. The question over here is, then is the government admitting that we cannot enforce law and order? Because the law and order comes out always when tear gas, water cannons, arrest with Arvind Kejriwal. But when those 30 hooligans came to the Jaipur Literature Festival and threatened, and they were inflammatory, nobody touched them. But Salman Rushdie was told to stay away. So I think there has to be a balance in this, in the virtual world as well, that people have to stop responding so neurotically to what they think could create. I see a lot of offensive things. I'm in fact offended deeply by a lot of M.F. Hussein's paintings, not as being anti-Hindu or anti-anything. I find them anti-female, anti-women. I think they're violent and ugly. But that's my feeling. I keep it. I don't have to burn anything down. Okay. So I think there has to be a culture where a government will say, state or center, will say that if something appears on the net, there is no reason for you to react. If you do riot, we will control it, because freedom of speech is important.
Well, I think that what I think, if you really look at it from a purely theoretical point of view, what she's saying is absolutely right. But what happens, Madhu, in situations like this is the following. You may take that position, but supposing a riot does take place, and in a riot, when it takes place, very many innocent people are put at risk. So when the government looks at these issues, they may agree with the fact that this is not something that people should be offended by. But they have to look beyond that. Look, if we do not do something today, there may be 10 people who are innocent who may actually be targeted. And the intent of the government is actually protecting innocent people from situations. So you're right, theoretically, that government must stand and say, we will not allow this to happen. But if it does happen, and there are lots of people who make it happen, and you're right, who is at risk? Innocent people.
No,
and government's responsibility is to protect innocent people.
I'm sorry, Kapil, you're negotiating with terrorists. That means Because every time you cow down, you give permission for the next time to take offense to
Madhu,
anything.
let's not take
The
any
minute
argument
you
to the extreme.
Which means that you are admitting that you will not control hooligans.
I did not say that.
But
I
you're saying
merely
you're looking
said
beyond-
we have to look at the
look
law and
beyond.
order situation.
You have
If we
to-
feel you can
You
control
have to
it,
say that you have to look beyond it. If you're looking beyond it, you're only looking
now,
at
Madhu,
votes.
But Vikram, what I can't understand in
this
this
is not
argument-
nothing to do with the internet. I don't know why you're bringing in
I can't
situations.
understand in this
It is
argument.
because
freedom of
it is
speech.
because
We are not on that issue.
Yeah,
It
but
is
yeah, we're not
no,
on that
it
issue.
is. It is to do with the internet because
right.
the blasphemous pictures you're talking about that
but the
people
Jaipur
will
festival
possibly
was-
react to.
The Jaipur festival was not on internet. My view is
know
that
why.
when we look at internet and kill internet because of hooligans, and I'm completely in agreement with you that we should, hang these hooligans and do whatever is required to be done. And, however, the question we are asking is from an internet point of view. Internet only gets the news out, and therefore people can't lie, even government can't lie, and therefore the news is out there. That's positive. And all we need to do is how to leverage internet to move forward rather than kill internet. And I see a governance, a stronger governance, and you rightly said, without identity we should not allow internet. That fortunately is not possible, and therefore, that's the reason internet is there, because people do not want to declare their identity in doing a lot of things. As long as they are not illegal, that's fine. But we should encourage and invest more, exactly like we do in physical world with cyber cops and cyber judiciary, so that people use internet more and more for our good. That is the main purpose out there.
And I want to come to
just
this
one
point
more
of anonymity,
at-
but that I think is part of the problem. But Chhavi, let me just get Chhavi in. At the end of the day, when you look at large parts of India, though, is this entire debate almost irrelevant?
And I'd say perhaps, and unfortunately, yes. Because, yes, this is a very interesting debate, and however, it's the debate of the virtual world. While we're still struggling with issues of the very basic, for the very basic amenities, such as not having safe drinking water available, not having proper education system, not having proper accountable system at the grassroots level. So, yes, it doesn't really affect us at that level, but I feel there's a huge need and huge potential for the bandwidth to come in. Of course, there's a national policy which states that we need to have services reach the last mile, but sadly enough, I feel by and large that is only restricted to the block level. But it doesn't go to the last mile, and I believe the last mile would mean a village, but it doesn't quite reach there. I personally have been working closely and been chasing the Department of IT within the state and outside, trying to bring in the bandwidth. It's taken a while, and I think that's where there's huge potential for the private sector to come in and play to bring that in.
But the question which emerges from this is there something about the internet? Because right now we're discussing controlling the internet. So are there certain aspects about information that comes out from the internet which are more dangerous than mass media? And I'll give you a couple of reasons why that might happen. Rather touch upon one of them, anonymity. The fact that you can go and say something and it's some anonymous voice out there, and yet that can be treated as the gospel truth. The second is the question of accountability. Now, if a media house is putting something out, you in a sense have to stand by it. If what you put out is wrong, there can be action taken, there can be defamation done. If you're some private citizen out there putting something out, you may not necessarily have that same amount of control. So as the internet gets to more and more people, do you think that danger is there? There will be more rumors, more rumor mongering, more panics being created?
I'd say it's both. It's both ways. We just need to be mature about how we deal with it. And yes, I think at a certain level we do need some kind of monitoring. How that's going to be done is questionable. But yes, given the fact that we tend to respond and react to things instantly without thinking twice, without even trying to figure out what the reality is, can be dangerous, as we have already witnessed through some of the cases which have been pointed out here.
So can I just ask all of you, before I want to start getting some questions in from the audience as well, but is there something, Mr. Sibal, about the internet, the reasons that I mentioned, the anonymity, the lack of accountability, which makes this a slightly more problematic challenge than just figuring out general laws of libel and defamation?
My view of all this is that internet is perhaps the only medium through which we will be able to empower people in India. It's going to take time for us. It is going to take time for us to build schools. It is going to take time for us to do all the things we need to do. But the internet, through fiber optics, can reach every home. We mustn't lose this opportunity. And we must allow the internet and the information to freely flow. Now, there will be situations which are extreme in nature. We need to deal with them, but we need to deal with them through a consultative process, to a comprehensive and consensual process. government should not be forcing laws on people and inhibiting the power of the internet. And I think that we must set up roundtables, have a full discussion with all stakeholders, and come up with agreed solutions, not laws that will kill the very nature of this great enterprise. We are at the cusp of a new social contract. 20 years from now, the world will be virtual. We need to build that virtual world in which civil society and government must be partners, not criticizing each other, but collaborating with each other to make a new paradigm shift to a new world.
I in fact, would like to add to that. I would second that completely. Just to give an example, we have schools which only teach 2 languages and geography. So you can imagine what kind of future would the 11th and 12th standard kids have. We have primary schools which have 2 teachers teaching 5 different grades. You can imagine what possibly happens. Now, this is a great medium to bring in e-governance, to bring in virtual education, to bring in training, vocational training, because finding people to come to villages is so difficult. But I believe that if this medium is brought in and education is brought in, automatically we will have more maturity towards how one understands and accepts the information that is so freely available and how one reacts to it. But the kind of disturbances which happen and the kind of reactions happening because the disparities are so huge and they're only just rising. So we need to address that, and I think this is a great way to be able to do so.
We are going to connect 250,000 villages, Gram Panchayats, with fiber optics by December 31, 2013. And the last mile connectivity will be through wireless broadband. So, in fact, the internet at that level will reach every household. And this is the way to move forward, not to curb this medium, but to empower this medium.
Okay, let me just get quick comments on this from all of you.
Sure. So you were asking, what is different and what is new. What is new is that we have unleashed this technology, the power to the individual, without fully understanding what that means. See, when I shout, I can be heard in this room or maybe slightly outside the room. I broadcast, but at least we have now, over the years, since the time radio broadcast, TV broadcast was there, we had time to set the rules and the regulations and the controls in place, the editorial review and all that stuff in place. Whereas internet has suddenly actually exploded now, and it also does not understand national boundaries and things like that. It's unprecedented actually. And even with radio and TV, individual did not have the power. Now the individual has the power. I think that's why we have to now relook at all the policies. So, for example, does the government have the ability to access data? Just like in the physical world, the government has to get a court order to come into your house and search. Maybe what is required is a court order to get access to that data. So we have to look at where can we find similarities and set up these rules. Today, it doesn't exist. We have to do that. I think that requires discussion. And if we do that faster, as Vineet said, we will be able to leverage the full power of the internet and get into the every citizen of the country at the lowest possible cost. Otherwise, the cost is going to skyrocket because of these litigations and the ability to trust the media.
So a couple of points, and I agree with what Kris is saying. First is that we must be very clear when a child is born, and the first 5 or 10 years, we don't try and over-discipline the child. And that is the only reason the child develops a personality of its own, and that is true with internet. That we should not.
An adolescent
yes,
child,
it is an adolescent child. It's growing. We do not know which direction it is growing, and we should allow some amount of freedom to happen, not over-engineer it. Some amount of freedom to happen, but at the same time, like with the child, there are certain deterrents, right? Some things which are completely no-no, and therefore in internet there should be only a few things which are completely no-no. They are deterrents. The second thing we must understand is internet and mobile commerce is going to go hand in hand. So we should not lose these mobile phones and the SMSs and all that stuff. So I don't think India is going to be big computer-connected internet world, but it's going to be a very big mobile country. And mobile commerce is going to be very big. With mobile commerce will come mobile scams, and therefore we are going to have a completely different problem at our hand. What I would like to see more from the government is proactive formation of different cells which understand internet, understand the kind of scams which are going to come on internet, understand the kind of identity thefts which are going to come on internet, and big things are going to be committed on internet, and therefore those literate cops, judiciary, which can take faster decisions in the digital world, because the digital world is very fast. As you rightly said, in 36 hours, even if you remove it after 36 hours, it doesn't matter. The objective has already been met. But in the next 36 hours, if the deterrent, if you jail that person or whatever you do to that person, then that is a deterrent. So in the new digital world, like we have for the physical world, we need to create an alternate policing and deterrence for the digital world, not over-policing, but enough so that we let it grow, and enough so that it is deterrent enough so that it is not misused.
Because, so just to come to some of the points that have been made out here, in the old world or in the traditional media, if you're in the New York Times and you're writing something that is completely wrong, there will be consequences. You've done it personally, you could be asked to go, you'll be fired, New York Times could have cases against you, whatever it is. I guess the challenge with the internet is that you could be out there putting out something completely wrong and defaming somebody without any accountability, and that can be then tweeted and retweeted 100 times, 1,000,000 times, and damage can be done, which is very difficult to control. But how do you do it without then becoming obtrusive and a police state?
I think that might be true, but I think the internet also offers you more control in some sense over content than you had before, right? So if I print something libelous in the newspaper, you can't take that back. It's been printed, it's in 1 million newspapers, it's maybe more than 1 million newspapers, it's been syndicated and it's been printed in newspapers around the world. Whereas in the internet, you can go and block that site, you can go and block that particular piece of content. It may have been copied already, but
you could publish a retraction in the newspaper the next day, and you needn't read the newspaper. It's the same thing.
Yeah, but
on the internet, sometimes a libelous piece of garbage can persist for all time to come.
Forever.
Even if that person is given an apology, you said this is not true, it'll be there somewhere in some corner of cyberspace, and it'll keep popping up.
No, that is true, but at the same time, you have the ability, like what happened with the gentleman in Pondicherry, of attacking him right away and stopping it right there, right? So
if you know who the person is, if it's anonymous, it's very difficult to do that. It's the point that Madhu was also
sure, but I would make a different distinguishing point on the anonymity question. There's some things on which anonymity is useful. If it's a whistleblower who is pointing out something that's either a corporation or a government is doing, he has legitimate concerns for his life that if his name is revealed, somebody could come after him. So I think I'm not so sure that I would want to endorse the fact that everybody doing anything on the internet should be named and shamed. Because as Kris said earlier, there are whistleblowers, and you don't want to put a hard and fast rule saying that nobody can be anonymous on the internet.
Although I assume you could have special laws or special rules for whistleblowers.
Perhaps, but you would have to have some sort of a safe harbor.
Everybody will be a whistleblower.
Yeah. Madhu, are there specific challenges to the internet which worry you as well? I mean, we know what the opportunity are. We're all, I think, believers that this is what the future is going to hold. But some of these specific challenges on the internet, how can they be controlled without ending up with the police?
I think that it works in the same way as the real world, because there have been people, say, example, Barkhadat, she filed sent a notice for defamation. You do that, and there's so much of garbage being printed, and I think a lot of it is ineffective. I mean, there are stories that have been sent to me which are completely fictitious about the ruling party or somebody, and you know that they're cooked up, and they're on the net. But who believes
But it's happening. But Madhu, those are happening on a daily basis. Those stories come and they're tweeted and retweeted. They're on Facebook.
Yeah, but it's only
they become like urban legends.
Yes, but what is the credibility? There's a question of credibility also. That if these stories are being retweeted and retweeted, I didn't believe it. No journalist has believed it to carry it on as a real story. All right, it's just been, and there's a big advantage for delete and block. So that's a great power that we have on the net. And on our website, on News Laundry, we have rules in our comments that you can criticize us, you can laugh at us, you can pass any kind of remarks, but a single word of abuse, bad language, and you're blocked. And that message is out on the website, so it's not there. Somebody by mistake, and they're blocked. So there are as many controls already that we would want to put in for our own protection and to keep our website, or most people who own news organizations would want to control it in a way that it is clean.
But Madhu, you would do that for the credibility of your own organization. I guess the question I'm trying to ask is that what this does throw open is the possibility of some stray individual sitting somewhere with a grouse. You could be a blackmailer for all you know, saying that you pay me some money, otherwise I'm going to be...
Somebody can distribute pamphlets against someone which are just as derogatory or defamatory and full of lies, they can do that in
Although
in
here
the
it could
real,
get to
in the
more
real
people
world.
potentially.
The virtual world is the same.
Yeah, but the
It's a
credibility
question of
does
how
go.
much of garbage have you read that you have deleted and disbelieved? Every day you get 7, 8 messages which are absolute garbage.
Probably a lot
so
more
I think
than that.
The
problem,
system
Madhu,
will also clean itself up.
I think what you're saying
because
is right, Madhu, but the
It'll
problem
clean
is...
itself up because the people who send those kind of stories around are not believed.
Is the answer is stronger
The
defamation
problem.
laws?
Sorry?
Is one of the
No,
answers
no,
is stronger
the defamation laws are there. The
But
question is we need to
I know
develop...
that you sue somebody for defamation, but take it 20 years.
We need to develop a new jurisprudence for this. We need cyber justices. We need real-time justice. That's what we need.
Police.
And we need policing. We need the police to understand the laws. We need a global agreement on what is a cyber crime. We need a global agreement on that. We have just had a Baku declaration. I came from just two days ago from there, where we have agreed in the declaration that illegality must be made accountable. So we must define what is illegality on the net. These are issues we have yet to grapple with. And I think it's an evolving situation. We should just not, come to any firm conclusions this way or that way. Let the situation evolve. In a couple of years' time, we will be far clearer than we are today. And we will then have an agreement and move forward collectively.
All right, let me now turn to the audience. Let me see who has a comment. Gentleman here first.
So my question is to Kris. This comes from Madhu's point that she proposed that if the identity of the person is known, that will act as a deterrent. Technologically, is it possible to enforce it?
So what I believe is that internet over time will split into two. There is a part of internet that will become anonymous, and you can be anonymous. And then there's a part of internet which you require to give identity. So for example, banking transactions, e-commerce transactions. You want your friends to know who you are, and you want to benefit from that networking, etc. So you want to disclose your identity. And at that point, there are also, along with that, some protection. Privacy laws will apply much stricter on that side. Whereas on the anonymous internet, you can't probably ask for service levels and things like that, because you are not saying who you are. So what service level can you get actually? So I believe that you will see an internet that is anonymous, which can be used for people who want to complain, and over time there will be ways in which you can trust or distrust that. On the internet, part of the internet which is identity, trust has to be 100%, because real life is involved, transactions are involved, etc. I think over time it will evolve into two parts, I believe.
But it will still not be enforceable. If somebody, for example, sitting in California, right, he's anonymous and he doesn't want to be known, and he does something. There's no way you can enforce it. So you ultimately will have to have a global agreement on this. And all service providers and intermediaries should be part of that global agreement. Then only we can have a world in which the internet will be a powerful tool, and at the same time an accountable mechanism will be evolved.
But at the same time, it is not that scary. If
Yes,
you really want to nail him down in terms of who did it, you can.
You can.
So technically you can. I think Kris' answer is more philosophically that they are
exactly.
the service providers.
No, but no, you could theoretically get behind a hotspot shield or equivalent, have a VPN.
But Vineet, there's a law with this law coming up in California which says that by law I am entitled to keep my anonymity.
Yeah.
So if by law you're entitled to keep your anonymity, there's no way you can enforce it. So there are a lot of very complex issues, and I think we are making a very simplistic...
A lot of people are listening to music in India on things like Pandora, doing it behind a hotspot shield, the computer things are
This
sitting
is
in
a
California.
highly complex medium when we have no real answers at the moment.
Okay, Rajiv. Where's the mic?
So a question for Minister Sibal. You very eloquently defended the IT rules, and clearly there's some disagreement on the panel as well as maybe in the audience as well about the IT rules and the interpretation of the IT rules. But my question is slightly more general. When it comes to press freedom, we've seen sometimes that the governments in India have used advertisements to influence the press, and there have been instances of that as well. And maybe the internet is sort of immune to that. So the argument could be that that's why we have a loosely defined law which leaves a lot of things open to interpretation as
Let me get this straight.
Madhu
You're
was
saying that the mainstream press can be controlled by the government.
through advertisements. So
Can it?
I wish we could.
there was the instance of the Union Minister Ambika
Wait a
Soni.
second. Why are you laughing? He's right. Justice Kajju, in fact, in his proposal to give more teeth, as if his bark isn't bad enough, has asked the government to give him the power to suspend the license of an organization to include the electronic media, as well as stop government advertising to that news organization. The government is the largest advertiser in every news organization, so don't laugh at this young
Point
man.
I'm making is that they are uninfluenced by that. The point that we are making is that despite all those advertisements, see what's happening on 24/7 on TV.
The news channel
the
in
government,
particular.
the government is not. The government is not. The government is not. No, the government is.
No.
The government advertising is going into print.
I didn't mean 24/7
Not television.
NDTV.
I'm so glad to hear that clarification. I'm so glad. Madhu, can I just
There's no government advertising on television as much as in print. He's talking about print.
No, he's talking. I don't think he's talking about print or television, but I think it's also a stretch to say that the entire press, the not online press, can be controlled by the government thanks to advertising money. I think I'm not even sure if they can be influenced, frankly. Maybe some can, but I don't think it would be correct to say that the entire press in India is being influenced by the
Those
government.
who can will be influenced even without the advertisements.
So,
That's just glib.
you don't agree, Madhu?
It's glib. It's a serious situation for the
But
press.
how much of the
It's very
online,
serious.
so how much of the not online press do you think is actually being influenced by the
It's
government
not
thanks to
influence.
advertising?
It's not influence. When the time comes for somebody's death anniversary or birthday or whatever, you look at the papers, all right? And if a newspaper or news organization has not been supportive or has been extraordinarily aggressive in exposes or whatever, there is a shortage of advertising to that news organization. So it's not a question of influence, it's a question of control, that you behave yourself and you won't get it.
But then fortunately most media houses don't necessarily seem to go by that because you still do read enough criticism of the government in the press. It's not that you're having a press in India which is by and large saying that the government is wonderful because they're giving us advertising.
Well, why don't we stick to the internet?
Which is why internet freedom is important.
What he was saying is that the government wants to crack down on the internet because the rest of the press is
even more important.
Which is what
I
would
think
like
he's
to know
absolutely right.
Let's ask another question. What?
Do you think the rest
Well,
of the press
I
is
don't think I
compliant?
need to respond to that question.
Well, the conversation seemed to have one disturbing feature. A few people out there felt that freedom of speech is not as important. I think we need to guard our freedoms enormously. And much as I've trusted myself with Kapil's hands several times and he successfully defended me, but he's not the same man when he's in government. We have to be very careful of people in government who always want to be, because they're the only people with the right, legal right to coercion. And the lesser the power with the government, the better off we are. So I would say we would be very, very worried of any statements that says that the freedom of speech is not as important as the internet.
But
it is far more important than all this.
I don't think anybody here...
Vinit did say that.
No.
Yes.
I did not say it. I don't think
No,
Kris
Vinit said that and you glibly, you sort of very happily agreed that look at industry saying that.
Since I said it, let me clarify that. The point I'm saying is that freedom of speech without deterrent is not good enough. That means you can say whatever you want and there are no consequences of for example, in real world, there are consequences of freedom of speech.
What are those consequences? You can, if you defame somebody, you go to court.
Yeah, that's all.
That's not the point.
That's the point. That's the point I'm making.
But you can go to court for the net also.
So for the net
subject
also
to
you
any-
can go to
You
court.
can't. You can't.
But when the moment you use the word freedom of speech is not as important as internet, you're conceding the fact that government can step in and control it, and that is dangerous.
But Ajit, government has not said that.
No, I'm not saying that.
Well, you said I was a different man.
No, you still
I'm surprised at
you
that.
still got one more year to be a different man.
Okay, I'm afraid we're almost out of... Sir, you want to quickly respond to that?
The point I'm making is that just because it is internet and just because you can be anonymous does not give you the right not to have deterrent on the consequences of what you say on the net. That's the point I'm making. Maybe the usage of words is wrong.
Okay, can I just get final, very quick thoughts? I'm afraid we're out of time already on this session. Final, quick thoughts on this entire subject. Madhu, why don't we start with you and come to this?
As far as I know, if you ask Google to give you the source of the person, the identity who has posted something against you, and I know Shekhar Gupta did that and filed a case for it and insisted that he is given the identity because somebody was defaming him, and he finally got it. So I think the real world spills over. There's no reason why we can't use the courts, we can't use the judiciary, the same laws for libel and defamation as for internet. And I think, yes, I agree with Kapil. We are new in this space, and we need to think about how to make it accountable and respectable. But I do think that I am extremely apprehensive of a government that says that we don't want to control you, we don't want to do anything, but then sets in laws repeatedly and passes legislation that augurs really badly for the freedom of press and for the freedom of the internet. And I think there is no question that there is a lot of violence. I have been abused, called all kinds of gullies, names, everything. But, you know, we have to remember there's always delete and block. And there's always action that you can take if you're defamed. So I don't think we should be quite that frightened of this big, bad, ugly internet. I think our country can handle it. Our citizens certainly can. And I think the government should too.
All right. Chhavi, final thoughts from you?
Given where I'm coming from, rural India, I think it's a great platform, and there should be, given the fact that I'm a Sarpanch, and most Sarpanches by and large do not get a platform to speak or be heard. So I think internet is something, if it comes in, it would provide that and provide means of networking to learn from each other and collectively be able to be heard and reach out to the world outside, which could come to help us with the various issues that we deal with. So I'm definitely for it. But of course, as I said earlier, a certain level of maturity is required. And I think by and large, we don't really understand and not really looking into what kind of crime, what levels of crime kind of go into in the cyber world. And I think we need to wake up to it and address it in whatever best way we can. There are multiple aspects and multiple options available to deal with that. And in fact, Mr. Sibal would be happy to connect you with someone that I just recently met. So there's a lot that's going on out there. We just need to be open to it and bring it in.
Okay. Vikas?
I think, I would just raise one question, one issue that we haven't spoken about very much, which is the question of interpretation. A lot of times what one person interprets to be totally fine content is deemed by another person to be obscene content or offensive content. And I think as a nation, India, like all other nations, has to really sort of address this question, is who does the interpretation, who is the arbiter, who is the final judge on these questions? Do we want to let an internet intermediary be the judge of that? Do we want to let the government be the judge of that? Do we want to let the judiciary be the judge of that? And who's the ultimate judge of that? And who wields the power to say this is offensive, this is not offensive?
Right.
And who has the gavel to say take this down, don't take that down? I think that's an important question.
Fair enough. Vinny?
I think 2 points. One is there is a real opportunity for us out here. We have to reach out to multiple people. E-governance is a big initiative, and through internet we can do that, and we should not squander that opportunity, and therefore we should do whatever investment is required to make that happen. Second point, one of the things we have not discussed is what are we doing about the people who have the data and the digital footprint of everything which we have done, which is the corporations which are making a lot of money out of internet, and also regulators and government who have the right over them to be able to extract the data. We should think carefully, because these are the same people who become monsters tomorrow if the regulations are not preventing them from doing what I think they potentially can do.
So from my perspective, this dialogue that is happening is very, very important to make sure that this medium gives us, takes us to the full potential possible. So I'm happy that this dialogue is happening, this discussion is happening. To me, laws are created by society. And so we have to decide what set of laws that we need for this medium also. There will be changes in the laws as time progresses, as the power of technology changes. the ability to do things with technology changes, just like we discussed now, if we can do cloning, what should we be doing? So we have to revisit these things. And I think it is very important discussion, and we must make sure that this is something majority of the people can work with. We will not be able to satisfy 100% of the people, but majority of the people can work with, and we can fully leverage the power of this technology.
So final thoughts from you. I'm just wondering, the entire question that has been coming about the government, that you are trying to play the police state in India. You're wanting to take India down the China model. Is it perhaps time for you to also come out and answer that?
I was at a dinner the other day in Baku, and some representative of a government said that if you really look at the entire world, the place where the media is truly free is India. This is not what I said, it's what somebody else said, that perhaps no other media in the world is as free as in India. But let me just come back to the issue. This is a highly complex issue. And I think we're looking at it from the standpoint of the fact that we look at our national laws and we try and interpolate them in cyberspace. It will not happen. I'll give you an example. Take hacking. Hacking can take place from anywhere in the world. You'll never find out what the source is. Your judiciary will never be able to find out. Any trial will not be able to move forward. Take drug trafficking. Take terrorism. You'll never be able to find out where it comes from. This cannot be governed by the laws of this land. It has to be governed by laws which are agreed upon at the international level. And you cannot even imagine the kind of crimes that we will see on the internet in the years to come. That doesn't mean that we curb freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is fundamental. In fact, the other day I said to telecom operators that 5-10 years down the road, hopefully you will not charge for a telephone call, because a telephone call is a communication between one human being and another. And that's part of freedom of speech. You should not be taxing it by charging the call.
Very happy to hear you say
yeah, but Ajit doesn't think so.
I'm not
Ajit thinks I'm against it. But the point is, we are here to protect the freedom of speech. I mean, we will protect it till our last breath. And nobody should have any doubts that we in government are in any way wishing to interfere. There may have been some laws in 2008 which have been wrongly interpreted or wrongly enforced by agencies. We will correct that. And we will have a full-fledged dialogue. But I don't think that anybody can accuse this government of making it into a police state. If at all people tell us, why don't you do something about what's happening? And we say, no, let it happen, because ultimately the people of India will decide.
I can see Madhu shaking her head violently.
According to Freedom Without Borders, India has gone down on the list of freedom in India. All right, if you look at the numbers, I don't have it with me, but I can give it to you later. You speak so beautifully, Kapil, and you seduce the audience. It's lovely. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of what you're saying is just completely untrue.
Madhu, freedom in the context of your international...
And I love what you're doing is you're asking people like Sunil Mittal and the rest of the service providers to give their services free when they're already hurting.
Let me just explain. When they talk about freedom in India, they're not talking about the internet, incidentally. They're talking about many other things, which involve you and me.
Again, you're being glib.
You and me and domestic help and all the kinds of things that we do at home. They talk about those
I really should give up, but I won't.
Okay. So I'm afraid we're going to have to call a truce on this one right now. Thank you all so much for having been with us. And I think as the years go on, we are going to struggle to find the correct way to deal with the internet. Certainly be shaping all forms of discourse as we go forward. So yes, finding the correct way to be able to monitor it, control it, discipline it, call it what you like, is going to be really crucial. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye for now.